Book of Job. We have been looking at this book and its message. We were trying to understand what is the real message of the book of Job, and we trying to develop it by looking at how various people, like what is Satan's opinion on God's justice, Job's friend's opinion on God's justice, and Job's opinion on God's justice, administration of justice in this world. So we saw Satan was saying basically that God's administration of justice is inherently flawed. We looked at that. People obey you, God, because they get blessings. They get everything in this world. That's the reason. If you don't bless them, they will never serve you. So your administration of justice is flawed. Second, Job's three friends, they said their argument in the book of Job is this: God's administration of justice is mechanically applied, right? That God always blesses those who obey and punishes those who disobey. So if there is suffering comes, suffering is the result of God's punishment. Remember, we looked at those two words. Of course, we already looked at in the systematic theology, retributive justice and remunerative justice. Retributive justice is that God punishes who does wrong. Remunerative justice, God rewards those who do right. That is the God's justice system according to Job's friends. So we looked at Eliphaz's opinion on God's justice, Bildad's opinion on God's justice. So far, opinion on God's justice and how they view Job's sin, right? So last week we looked at Job's friends. How did they view Job's sin, and how did they view Job, thinking that Job has sinned, and what is happening to Job is a result of God's retributive justice, that God punishes Job. Of course, all these friends have opinions that are slightly different. Yes, that was there. Now today we need to look at, of course, Job's argument. So third is how Job views what God has done, right? What does Job view, or how does Job think what God has done? So he thinks God's administration of justice is capriciously interpreted, right? He does whatever he wants. Let's look at how. Until he had experienced his intense suffering, Job agreed with his friends about God's moral order. Job had no problem to say, yeah, God always punishes the wicked and rewards the righteous, because that was the general understanding of the people. Now, but when he started to suffer, he changed his mind. Since he is living righteously yet suffering, he is confused. And now he's looking for other explanations on how God administers justice. You see, until this time, he's thinking it was something different, but now he suffers. Since he suffers, not because of his sin, now he has to interpret God's justice in a different way. Job's initial response to his calamities is a calm acceptance of these as God's will for his life. Yeah. You know that first beginning chapters, he said, the Lord gave, the Lord took it away. Blessed be the name of God. He worshiped God, right? Yes. So in the beginning, he accepted, calmly accepted everything that took place in his life. After prolonged reflection, now he realizes that his understanding of the moral order of life has collapsed. Now he realizes, yeah, there is something wrong with his theology of life. Because his theology was God always blesses those who do right and always punishes those who do wrong. But now he has not done wrong, but he's suffering. So somewhere there is a problem. Let's look at summary of Job's argument. Right? Summary of Job's argument. In examining Job's thought, we will organize this summary around the sequential development of his speeches. So we are going to look at speeches of Job. Let's look at the first cycle, right, where he makes his complaint. In his first speech, chapter 3, Job's complaint provides the occasioning incident for friends to speak. Job reacts to his situation by wishing that he had never been born. You see, which is very, very serious. None would say easily on a daily basis, oh, I wish I would have never been born. Only people when they encounter problems and that is serious, intolerable, they might say, I wish I would not have never been born. Right? So he makes a wish that is impossible. Yeah. He can never go back to, yes, maybe I get some kind of writing on my screen. Okay, maybe it's coming from somewhere. Please look at if you keep your if you're using a phone and if you keep your finger on the screen, maybe it might provide some writing on the screen, which may not be wanted. All right. So Job knows that even if he wishes that he would not have never been born, that is not going to happen. He knows that one. That is not going to happen. So you know what he did? In his second speech, Job pleads with God to kill him. Yeah. You took my children. You took all the wealth. Why don't you kill me? Right? Who says? Job says. In his third speech, he moves beyond his death wish and desires. No, it's not only you kill me, but desires a declaration of innocence. God, you need to declare my wrong. If you need to show me my wrong. If you cannot, you need to say that I am innocent. All right. So he goes in the third speech much more. Right. So that's something that we need to understand. So in the heat of defending his reputation, so for Job, his reputation becomes big. Actually, what he does, he accuses God. You see, Job accuses God of being hostile to him. All right, let's look at that verse here, friends. Please, can we read verse chapter 9, verse 8? If your Bible. Anyone? 9 verse 8. Job 9 verse 8.
He alone stretches out the heavens and treads on the waves of the sea. Job 9:8.
Oh, 1 second. Let me. Job 9:8.
He alone stretches out the heavens and treads on the waves of the sea.
Okay. Okay, can you read 18?
(18) 9:18.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. 9:18. Yeah.
He
Okay.
would not let me catch my breath, but would overwhelm me with misery.
All right. Let's go to chapter 10, verse 3.
Does it please you to oppress me, to spurn the work of your hands, while you smile on the plans of the wicked?
All right. So if you look at chapter 9 is going to be an interesting chapter for Job's accusation. From the beginning on, and if you look at chapter 9, verse 1, the Job replied, indeed, I know that this is true, but how can a mortal be righteous before God? He knows that. And then he goes on complaining, right? He says, you are in a way, you're not doing it right, not doing it right by bringing these incidents in my life. And then he goes and say, you are oppressing me while smiling on the plans of wicked. Now, because of God's posture toward him, Job realizes that God will never give him what he feels is his right. Right? He thinks that God will never give him what he thinks as right. That is the declaration of his innocence. If you read, he believes that God will never say that Job is right. So Job develops his thoughts further, and he feels that with an arbitrator, you know what is arbitrator? A mediator. It might be possible for him to enter into a litigation with God. Let's look at verse 32 also. Verse 32, chapter 9. All right.
He is not a mere mortal like me, that I might answer him, that we might confront each other in court.
All right. Yeah, and go ahead, read.
Completed.
Yes.
9:32 is completed.
35. Okay, until 35.
If only there were someone to mediate between us, someone to bring us together, someone to remove God's rod from me, so that his terror would frighten me no more. Then I would speak up without fear of him. But as it now stands with me, I cannot.
Yes, this is an important verse in the book of Job. Chapter 9, verse 30 to 35 is the most important verses where Job is saying, I desperately need a mediator, right? Desperately need a mediator to talk to God. I don't have. All I have is mere mortal man here who does not know anything. Now, this is a passage that indicates there is a need of mediator, which is fulfilled in Jesus Christ, right? Yes, he is the mediator that comes. So the cry for a mediator was from the beginning onwards, from the beginning of man's history. It was there, right? So that you can talk to God. God is not a man to understand everything. So Job feels, I don't have a person who really can come in between me and God, right? So that is a very important verse in chapter 9, where Job pleads for a mediator. And in a sense, in the New Testament, you have that mediator coming, that is Jesus Christ, to plead. Yes, go ahead.
Where else, Pastor, in the Bible, in the Old Testament, before Job, does some indication like this? Is there any before Job?
Sorry, you were asking indication of what?
Of a mediator, like the way Job is saying,
Right. Is there any now? We don't know. I don't think there is anyone, like, if you look at the time of Job's writing, and if it is coming to the patriarchal times like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that is the time of his timing, because remember, Job offered sacrifices, which is very important in understanding when this book was written. When after Moses, when Moses came, there also Aaron came, Levitical priesthood started, right? But Job was written before Moses and others come into scene, because Job is the father of the family offering sacrifices, which is very similar. Noah, Abraham, Isaac, they all, Jacob, they all offered sacrifices, right? Yeah. So there are the head of the family became priest. Became priest.
When Moses' time, God Himself provided Aaron and priesthood.
Yeah, Aaronic priesthood began. Aaronic priesthood began from Moses' time.
Moses' time.
Yeah.
Of Himself, God gave of Himself, calling Moses and giving, this is the way you should do.
Right.
Build a temple and all that.
Yeah.
That means after the Ark of the Covenant.
I mean, yes, it is connected to, at least let's say it has become, because when God declared Israel as a nation at Mount Sinai, from there, he gave the commandments, and there it started. So what about before? I don't know whether you have any desire for a mediator to communicate to God, other than
Moses himself was.
Yes, other than all these leaders were, like these fathers were the mediator in a sense, because any priest, when he offers sacrifice, he becomes the mediator. He becomes the mediator. So Job himself was a mediator for his sons, but it is inadequate. It is insufficient. That is the main thing. And that is a cry and a plea for Job here, that he wished if there was a mediator to plead his case before God.
Right, thank you.
All right. Okay, so let's look at again. So here Job is looking for a mediator. Job desires for a court hearing. Look at that. Court hearing with God grows stronger in his fourth speech, for he requests a legal hearing with God before he dies. This was the constant desire for Job. I want a court hearing. Tell me, what did I do wrong? Right? So you see that one. Now, so we looked at, this is the first speech cycle. So the first speech. Now let's look at Job's speeches from the second cycle. What was he looking at? We are moving from the beginning chapters into the middle part of the chapters in the book of Job. There you read, in the 5th and 6th speeches, he again wishes that impartial mediator would serve as his defense attorney before God. Look at 16 verse 18 now. Chapter 16, verse 18. 16 verse 18 to 22, quite interesting verses. Let's look at.
Earth, do not cover my blood. May my cry never be laid to rest. Even now, my witness is in heaven. My advocate is on high. My intercessor is my friend as my eyes pour out tears to God. On behalf of a man, he pleads with God as one pleads for a friend.
Only a few years will pass before I go on the journey of no return. He's going to die. He makes a plea. So Job is convinced of his innocence. Right? Now, in the second speech, he knows that he's innocent, and he's confident that God will vindicate him. Even if it is not in this present earthly sphere. Now, finally, what he thinks, I know what I am, right? He needs a mediator, but now he believes, he changes his posture and says, maybe I may not be vindicated here, but I will be vindicated in heaven, at least, So, however, Job's conviction of his innocence prompts him to accuse God of having wronged him. Yes, again, that is the problem. He says, he was thinking that God is wrong. Look at chapter 19, verse 6. Look at 19, verse 6. Quite, explicit statement.
Then know that God has wronged me and have drawn his net around me.
Yes. So Job says, God wronged me. So he is clearly accusing God. God, you are wrong. You're wrong. Right? So it's not. Now, the reason why I said the message in the beginning, it's not simply righteous suffering, but it is much more, because as you read into this book, now you get the sense of what is really going on in the life of Job. So there are many speeches. Now, in his 7th speech, he ponders God's system of justice in the light of permitting the wicked to live happy and long. So, you know what Job is saying? In God, in your system of justice, you know what actually happening? You are permitting wicked to live happy lives and long lives. Yeah. And he says, you permit them even to be buried with honor. Who? Wicked people. It's not only that they live long life, happy life, and they are buried with honor. What a justice system, God. Job is confused about God's moral order. However, he's still convinced that he wants no part with the counsel of the wicked. But he says, I don't have any counsel. I don't have any part with the wicked, since they do not recognize that God is the ultimate source of their blessing. So he still say, no, I don't want to be part of wicked. But I think there is a problem in your ruling system, in your justice system. Now, third, Job speeches from third cycle. Now, in his 8th speech, so we are looking at, there are several speeches that Job made. These were cycles of speech. So 8th speech comes in the third cycle. So in the 8th speech, Job observes some enigmas in God's moral order, right? Some enigmas. Remember that word enigmas? It is like vanity in the book of Ecclesiastes. Vanity, vanity, vanity. Also can be translated enigmas, something vain. Yet Job is convinced God will rectify these enigmas. He does not know everything. He believes one day God will correct. Job's quest for the vindication of his integrity moves him in his 9th speech to declare that God has denied him of what? Justice. Look at chapter 27, verse 2. 27.
As surely as God lives, who has denied me justice, the Almighty who has made my life bitter.
Made a taste and bitterness of my soul. So you see, he says, Lord, you denied what? Justice. You see?
Sometimes psalmist also, David also has prayed like that.
Yeah. Sometimes they do, because those are prayers, just raw expression of feelings.
Yes, and anybody can do it even now.
I mean, can anybody do it? Maybe once you have more revelation of God, you need to be careful. When Job makes all these things, revelations are very little, a few things. So, but now can we pray? Once you know all these verses, you may not, but at least when we are desperate, we might speak to God like that. Yes, still we might, because we are human beings. We are weak vessels. But at least I would be happy if you are speaking to God. It is your cry to God, because that tells that you have a relationship with God. But anyone says all these things, leaving God, is in the pit, right? Some of the Psalms, when you read, you may see how to make a sense of it, But I would say, especially when you go through valley of death, sufferings, people would cry out to God, Lord, why these things in my life? Right? You might cry. You might cry when you face that kind of situation. I don't deny that fact. Yes.
People
They
are
will.
crying and say,
Yeah.
I wish I were not born.
Yes. You might cry like Job, but I will be happy if you do cry to God, not leaving God, right? Because that's everything changes. So yes, I would say you won't say, when you know all these things, you may not say that God denied him justice, but you might ask, Lord, why it happens to me? That question could be there. Everyone could ask, but then you learn from the scripture why it happens. It's not for your evil, not for the bad, but it is for your good and for the glory of God. Once you learn that, things will take a different shape, right? So, Job, he says, Lord, you denied justice. However, he subsequently balances this out by affirming that God will judge the wicked. He knows that God will judge the wicked, but right now, the problem is that God denied justice to Job. Now, let's look at final speeches. So we looked at the third cycle, now going to the final. In his 10th speech, Job presents a poem on wisdom. In this poem, he states that man does not have sufficient wisdom to solve some of the problems in this world. Only God has this type of wisdom. All right. So that is as he goes on, now he says, maybe we don't know everything. After reviewing his earlier state of blessing, he then ridicules those who have attacked him. Yeah. He ridicules and affirms that God has attacked him and refuses to respond to his request. So what Job says, Job still claims that he is a righteous man. God attacked him, but yes, I understand. I don't know. It looks like God denied justice to me, but he looks at Job's friends and say, no, you're not doing what is right. Not doing what is right. Job's conviction of his innocence and of God's justice compels him to take an oath of innocence in chapter 31. You know where he moves? He goes, it's just he climbs the ladder of argument after argument after argument, and finally comes to that place where he is going to take an oath and say, I am innocent. I am innocent. So if I am innocent and suffering, he's declaring. So then who has the problem? Definitely the other side. It is God has a problem. God's justice system faces a problem now because God declares he does everything to declare his justice. Job oath poses a problem for God's moral order, right? A problem for God's moral order. If Job is innocently suffering, divine justice appears to be in error. In Job's desire to go to court with God, he is attempting to approach God as what? An equal. That is very important in understanding the book of Job. What is that? As Job desires to go to the court with God to declare his innocence, what he was doing, he was attempting in his approach as an equal with God. I am ready to argue with God. Though Job believes that God does have a justice system, he's in effect accusing God of using it capriciously, the way he wants. He's not doing according to proper order. All right. So that's how his argument leads. Now, let's look at the Job's wrong accusations against God. All right, what are the things he accused God of? God accuses Job of speaking out of ignorance. Right? Okay. Right, somebody's joining. God accuses Job of speaking out of ignorance in 38 verse 2, of making false accusation against him in 40 verse 2, of discrediting his justice in 40 verse 8. Because of this, we should understand that Job made number of false accusations against God. So clearly, God made some accusation against Job, which helps us to learn, yes, Job also made accusation. What are the accusations he made? Let's look at number one. First accusation. God mistreated Job. Right? Let's look at chapter 10, verse 3. Job chapter 10, verse 3. We already read that one. Can we read one more time? Anyone? 10 verse 3.
Does it seem good to you that you should oppress, that you should despise the work of your hands and smile on the counsel of the wicked?
All right. Does it please you to oppress me? So, yes, God mistreated me. God mistreated me. That is what he basically says, right? And in chapter 16, he says, you attacking him in anger. God attacked him in anger. That's the reason all things happen. Chapter 19, you read of wronging him and counting him as his enemy. Let's look at chapter 19. Let's look at chapter 19, verse 6. 6.
Know then that God has wronged me, and has surrounded me with his net.
7.
If I cry out concerning wrong, I am not heard. If I cry loud, there is no justice.
Okay, come to verse 11.
He has also kindled his wrath against me, and he counts me as one of his enemies.
All right, so yes, that is the complaint. So he says, God is mistreating me. All right, that's number one. First complaint. God sees Job as his enemy. God never seen that way, but Job making a complaint. Second accusation of Job. God was not taking care of suffering people. You see, God is not taking care of suffering people. This is to say, God was not doing his job as a ruler since he allowed the widow, the orphan, the poor, and the needy to be oppressed by the wicked. Chapter 24 clearly explains that. He says, God, you're not doing your job. You're not caring for the poor because wicked oppresses widow, poor, orphans, and other people. So you're not doing your job. Not doing your job. All right. So that is another accusation. God doesn't take care of suffering people. Third accusation is by accusing God in this manner, though done in ignorance, and by desiring consequently to enter into a litigation with God. You see, litigation, like it is a case with God. Job was in effect passing judgment on God, and therefore making himself out to be God's equal. Because he argues, his argument is so high. It's in the highest plane, saying that God is wrong. He making himself equal with God, which is known as pride. When he makes himself equal with God, this is pride. Remember Satan. Remember Satan. He became who he was because of pride. In effect, Job was maintaining that God capriciously administered justice. In response to this, there is only one who is able to speak ex cathedra on the administration of justice. So what is happening? Job became a pride man by making this complaint. Job became a pride, with a pride, like he tried to argue his case with God as two equals, which is really problematic. Now, there comes God's answer to Job's accusation. Now, so far, what we looked at was Job's friends, Satan's interpretation of God's justice, right? So these are all known as misguided application of God's administration of justice. So we looked at Satan's view. We looked at Job's three friends and Elihu's view on God's justice. And then we looked at Job's view, right? This is Job's view. God's administration of justice is capriciously interpreted, right? It has no reasoning, no logic. That is what was happening. Now, God's reply, right? The divine interpretation of God's administration of justice. That is what we need to look at. It takes some time. So because we don't have that much time left, we will go to the next topic. We will not continue God's administration. We'll do that tomorrow because we need to cover a good amount of portions here on God's reply, right? Which is very important as we conclude the message of the book of Job. Any questions?